Thank you for inviting me here. So I will present you a case study of kind of reform of non-standard contracts in Slovakia that happened last year. I put reforming in quotes because normally I think that reform has some positive implications, but in this case, not everything was positive. I will explain later. That's why it's in quotes. So first of all, what I will talk about? I will talk about non-standard contracts as opposed to standard employment contracts. So we have special arrangements, 3 types of arrangements in Slovakia and also in the Czech Republic. They have the same. We are two only countries in the EU that have these special arrangements. And I will not talk about temporary contracts that are employment contracts because this is not an issue. This is not a big issue in Slovakia. So the issue is about these special arrangements, 3 of them. The first one is called agreement to work. It represents 40% of all agreements. The second one is agreement to perform specific work, 34%. And the third one is agreement to work for students. So the first one, as you can see, is for up to 10 hours per week, maximum 1 year. So it's kind of part-time contract. The second one is up to 350 hours in 1 year, again for maximum 1 year. And for students, it's up to 20 hours per week, up to 26 years of age. More than 3/4 of people who have these agreements earn less than 150 euro monthly. For comparison, minimum wage in Slovakia this year is 352 euros. So I'm going to talk about these arrangements. What were key features before 2013 for these agreements? They were highly popular. I will show you later the graph, the chart where you will see that ever more people or ever more firms used to employ people on these arrangements. They were very flexible. So there were very easy hiring and firing procedures, limited regulations, and very low tax burden. You only paid 19% personal income tax rate, but only from income about 304 euro monthly. In this year, it's 317. So in Slovakia, we have personal income tax that is paid only above the income of 304, or this year 317. So if your income is lower, you don't pay any income tax at all, even from employment contracts, also from these agreements. So people with low income, most people with agreements didn't pay any income tax at all. And they only paid 1.05% social contribution rate, as opposed to 48.6% for employment contracts. So very low tax burden. What were the problems? First one, limited protection, including the social benefits, so covering social security, unemployment benefits, etc. And tax evasion. So still more people, still more firms use this to evade taxes. These were the problems. What was the reform? The government, with the effect from January 2013, increased social and health contributions to the same level as for employment contracts. So from 1.05 to 48.6%. There were the exceptions for service and old age pensioners. They pay only 23.8. Disability pensioners and students pay only 29.8. Students up to 18 years of age pay 1.05 from income up to 66 euro monthly, and up to 26 years they pay 1.05 from income up to 155 euro monthly. So these are exceptions. Otherwise, the payroll tax burden was equalized with the standard employment contracts. Another change was that the government adopted the same minimum wage rules to all agreements. Before, minimum wage rules were not adapted to agreements. So what were the impacts? There was a decrease in number of people working on agreements by almost 40%. I will show you the chart later. But in numbers from 552,000 in December 2012, it fell down to 344,000 in December 2013. So now the question is, where are those people? As you can see, there was no significant change in number of employees. There was just minor increase in number of registered unemployed. And there was minor decrease in number of self-employed. So they are not here, basically. So still there is a question, where are they? Here you can see the chart. So this is the decline. The red columns are number of agreements. Several people, or some people, used more agreements at the same time. Therefore, I put the blue columns there, which represent number of people working on agreements. And you can see the decline from December 2012 to January 2013. And it's the same. Here you see that it went up before. What you don't see here, and to make the picture more complete, it would be interesting, I want to attract your attention. It jumped up in 2009 as with the onset of the crisis. It jumped up from around 200,000 to these levels. So before 2009, it was around between 200,000 and 300,000 people. Then it jumped up. So the employers, the firms, needed to reduce costs with the onset of the crisis in 2009, and they used massively. They started to use the agreements. Okay, then it fell down. Why it didn't? Why there remained these 200 or 300,000? Because there are these exceptions that I showed you before. So, and there's one reason, and the other reason is that there are still flexible hiring and firing procedures. So they are still more flexible than standard employment contracts. That's why the agreements didn't disappear so far. The income distribution, how it changed. You can see here that the share of people working on agreements earning more than 200 euro monthly went down, and the share of people earning less went up, and the share of people who didn't have income in a given month went down. This was probably because I will explain more on it later, but because many people who had at the same time the agreement and the employment contract, or they were self-employed, they canceled the agreement, and they usually had the higher income from the agreements. So the share of their share went down. So there were actually, here is the exact number, 111,000 people who ceased their agreements and continued to work on employment contract or as self-employed in December. One think tank in Slovakia calculated that their net income decreased on average by more than 60 euro monthly. So now we have the answer that 111,000 remained in the standard employment or self-employment. And where are remaining 97,000? So we don't know, but some of them are probably pensioners, and definitely some people and money moved to shadow economy. Here you can see the results of the survey among 25 firms employing 15,000 people, how the employers reacted to this change. You can see that 1/3 was not affected, and 2/3 felt the impact and reacted mostly by restricting agreement contracts. 1/4 changed agreements for personal leasing. 22% changed the organization of work. That's what we did, for example, at INEKO, because we were also affected by this change. 22% reacted by firing people, 16% reported decreased profits, 16% increased prices of their products, 4%, just 4% changed agreements for employment contracts. So what was the mistake? Why I'm not so positive about this change? So my prior objection is that the government transferred full payroll tax burden also on people with low income. So you could see in the beginning that 3/4 had lower income than 150 euros monthly, and the government transferred this burden on them. So, rapid decrease in net income forces them to unemployment, shadow economy, or other types of non-standard contracts. So basically, if you think that they also applied the minimum wage rules for these agreements, the people whose value added or labor productivity is below minimum wage, currently they do not have legal options to find work in Slovakia. So what are possible solutions? Last year we came with a suggestion that was inspired from German mini jobs. And we proposed basically 3 alternatives to the Ministry of Finance. And here you can see one of them very briefly. All people working on agreements and or employment contracts should be freed from paying social and health contributions from their total income up to a certain threshold, for example, 2/3 of minimum wage, and pay gradually higher contributions from higher income. And again, from certain upper threshold, they should pay the full contributions. We proposed it in a way that the upper threshold was twice the lower one. The state should pay for the missing contributions. So we proposed this to the Ministry of Finance. They calculated the impact. What would be the impact on the public finance, on the budget. And they came with their own proposal, which is going to be published next week and will be adopted from the next year. And they call it health insurance allowance. And it's in a way that the employment contracts, so no agreements, only employment contracts with income equal to a new minimum wage of 380 euro monthly would be freed from paying health insurance contributions. The effective rate would increase linearly with higher income, and the full 14% rate would be paid from a certain threshold. For example, minimum wage multiplied by 1.5. So you can see that there are several differences from our proposal. One of them is that they want rapidly increase the minimum wage from 352 euros to 380 euros. The other one is that the agreements are left behind. So they want to apply it only on the standard employment contracts. And the third one is that the social contribution rate of 34.6% would remain. Our proposal included the social contribution rate. So these are the problems which might not really solve problems of people who have low income and whose productivity is below minimum wage. This is an important problem in Slovakia because we have 8% Roma minority, and Roma people represent about almost 1/3 of unemployed in Slovakia, and even bigger share of inactive people in Slovakia. And these people are very low skilled, and they really cannot find job that would be for, that the employer would pay them the minimum wage for it. Especially they live in eastern part of Slovakia or southern part, in regions where the average wage is lower than the national average wage. So the minimum wage is even bigger barrier for them to find the work there. I was not talking about other types of contracts that we have in Slovakia, especially about self-employed. We have 366,000 self-employed. The government also increased the social contributions burden and tax burden on self-employed. So the reform included the self-employed, and the result was that the number of self-employed went down. from 394,000 in July 2012 to 366 this year. Then we have special arrangements for the authors. I don't want to talk about more about this. Then we have personal leasing agencies, where more than 30,000 employees are employed. And then we have also contracts based on the civil code, but it's not at all to the extent that you have here in Poland. But it's starting to be more popular after introducing this high burden, payroll tax burden on agreements. I know about examples about firms who changed from agreements to these contracts based on the civil code, but these are rather occasional, and I don't think that it's definitely not such a big problem as here in Poland. That's all from me now. The last thing I want to say is that I didn't talk about very important thing, and it is in-work benefits that the government started to introduce, and also INEKO proposed it to introduce. That means that Slovakia has a special problem that the social benefits, we have very rapid withdrawal of social benefits as people find work and have legal income. So the motivation of people to start work for low income is very low in Slovakia. And that's why we proposed to introduce in-work benefits, and the government did it, and will go further even next year. That is a very important part of the reform, but maybe sometimes later. Thank you very much.